Well, thank you for hitting play. I'd like to welcome you in advance to Thursday's Open Source Leadership Development Meeting. Over the next 15 minutes, I'm going to give you some background information that will make our time together much more productive and fun. Before I dig in, let me introduce myself. I'm Scott Bohannon, the head honcho at AchieveForum. That's a younger, skinnier version of me. Now, as you can tell, I'm not from the UK or Ireland, but I'd like you to bear a few things in mind. First, I have danced with Meghan Markle. In fact, just shortly before she started dating Prince Harry. Now, I'm not saying I had anything to do with shaping the future, but, well, you never know. I also once paid Tony Blair a lot of money to spend time with me. And according to Ancestry.com, more than 90% of my G&A comes from the UK and Ireland. So hopefully you'll treat me as an honorary countryman on the day. Let me give you just a bit more color about AchieveForum. Our primary offices are in Boston, London, Singapore, and Sydney, but our delivery network has us in every nook and cranny of the globe. For Thursday, I thought it would help to skim quickly our core beliefs. First, we believe that everyone leads every day. In the digital age, it's the accumulation of small everyday leadership moments that drive performance at least as much as major transformations. Second, we need to democratize access to the best leadership resources. They can no longer be restricted to the privileged few. Third, continuous change is normal. Organizations have to adapt constantly to survive and thrive. Fourth, access to knowledge is great, but people learn to lead from other people. It's people that matter most. As you're going to see, our core beliefs aren't simply preferences, but backed up by hard data about the world in which we operate. Well, enough about us. Let me get into the substance with a short leadership report card. If this is your kid's report card, you'd be in a state of panic and doing a lot more than just getting them a tutor. Workplace stress is costing UK businesses nearly £250 billion per year. 75% of organizations report a lack of adequate leader successors. Nearly half of executives formally fail in the first 18 months of their new job, with many more being allowed to fail and share. And up to 3/4 of organizational transformations are unsuccessful. Now, the stats are scary, but they're antiseptic. What we hear from employees at all levels regarding workplace stress is much more visceral. Fear, fatigue, discrimination, frustration, insufficient adaptation and innovation, and frequent surprises are among the complaints that we hear from all of our clients. But why is this happening? It's not like we aren't investing in our leaders. The explanation begins with the changes in the world around us. No surprises here, I'm sure. First, the pace of change in business has accelerated dramatically. Second, we face far more uncertainty than we did just a few decades ago. And third, the way we work has changed profoundly. I'm going to skip the first two and focus on the third, work transformation, because the treatment of this change in the literature out there is surprisingly superficial, and the consequences we find are vastly underappreciated. The first change we talk about all the time. We have a huge surge of young employees entering the workforce. The data here is from the US, but it's a similar story in most of the West. Most of the articles, though, have focused on challenges with millennials and the need to engage them. Very little has focused on the imperative to teach them to lead. Not only are these younger workers assuming more and more formal leadership positions, they're also digital natives and understand things about how the world works that older employees just don't. What they don't know how to do is lead their more experienced colleagues to embrace and leverage those transformations to improve organizational competition and performance. Given the pace of change, frankly, we can't teach them to lead effectively soon enough. Bigger than shifting demographics, though, is the shift from manufacturing to knowledge work. The data here just makes the point that a growing majority of people in the UK have shifted to knowledge work. No news there. And while we hover over the social and educational implications of that change, our treatment of the leadership implications has actually been pretty superficial. That's not like we haven't had enough time to get ready. Peter Drucker laid out the 6 characteristics of knowledge work that you see here as early as 1959. We have to ask, what is the task? The individual knowledge workers must be responsible for their productivity. Innovation must be a part of the work. Knowledge workers must continually learn and teach. Quality is at least as important as quantity. And knowledge workers are assets, not costs. Drucker emphasized that at least the first 5 of these characteristics were diametrically opposed to what we have wanted of manual laborers. And as we'll see, knowledge work shifts most of the responsibility for innovation to the knowledge workers themselves. In short, we need knowledge workers to be Picassos, not so much laborers. But what Drucker didn't know was how much knowledge work would involve collaboration among employees in the digital age. Researchers have been studying how teams of knowledge workers can effectively get things done since the 1970s, but most of that research hasn't made its way into the corporate mainstream. So, on the left, defining the task. We start with, what do we need to accomplish? Is it maximize output, optimize the quality, or find a solution? Do we need to synergistically innovate? Moving down, what type of thinking do we need? Divergent or convergent? At the bottom, how do team members interact? These are concepts most people don't know. Is the work additive, compensatory, conjunctive, discretionary, disjunctive? Beyond defining the task, over on the right, managing interactions. What type of team composition do we need? Some kind of diversity, or is it a situation where homogeneity is better? What structure do we need? Formal, ad hoc, and so on. And finally, how do we engage people? There are inherent trade-offs between team success, individual contribution, and collaboration. What do we do as people leave and come on to the team? What about when individuals are struggling? And overall, how do we manage these interactions? That's a very complex set of considerations, and it has to be done continuously, every day, often multiple times per day. Yet most of these concepts are unfamiliar to leaders. Complicating things further, while we want Picassos, we also want them to mix the paint, hold the brush, and make strokes the way we tell them. There are good, often critical reasons why we need employees to comply with important standards, from safety and regulatory requirements to organizational agility to organizational learning. Adherence to standards in many cases creates a lot of value, and it often isn't optional. But toggling between collaborative artistry and compliance isn't easy, and people generally want to spit the bit on the latter. Even with all the complexity you saw about how effective teams need to operate, it's easy to miss how profoundly work has transformed. That's because work is a pretty pedestrian term. The critical insight we've captured here is meant to make all this more vivid. With knowledge work in the digital age, we've integrated the laboratory into the production such that we need the best of both environments. But neither environment can operate the way that it did before. Putting it all together, we have a radical shift in how we need to manage getting work done. In the manufacturing era, we were all about leadership by error reduction. That's the left. We wanted as much as possible to eliminate judgment and creativity right out of the production process. We wanted processes that we could run with high precision. That focus generated incredible economic progress and wealth. But in the digital age, moving to the right-hand side, production and innovation are integrated. In some cases, we still need the benefits of standardization and error reduction, but we also need to drive employee behaviors in the exact opposite direction every day toward creative, high judgment activities. Hence, we refer to this as leadership by tension management. Empirically, we are seeing most knowledge workers leading, and the pace of business means they're encountering leadership moments every day. On the right, as a starting point for our study on knowledge work, we collected time and communication data for one of our researchers, a frontline manager, and for me, the CEO. You can see what we found. Knowledge workers interact with many people. They operate significantly and every day through influence. They spend disproportionate time in collaborative, co-creation activities or synergistic activities. And they spend substantial time doing, even when they're managers. Much of this we find, I think, intuitive, but it runs quite contrary to a lot of the conventional wisdoms about how managers and employees are supposed to behave. So already, knowledge workers lead every day. But in fact, we need them to lead a lot more. Why? Because managers don't have the capacity to lead everything. Not only would they have to lead through all that complexity we saw around effective teams, they would have to conduct all of their traditional responsibilities as well. Now, maybe the random unicorn manager here or there could pull that off, but for the rest of us, we're going to need our colleagues to co-lead these efforts with us. In short, because the world has changed and work transformed, everyone leads every day. And we need even more leadership from everyone moving forward. Now, while we can blame the first part of why leaders today underperform on the world around us, we're in fact responsible for the second part. Let me talk briefly about what we call the leadership development shortfall. There are three rather insidious ways in which we've left employees wanting. First, we don't teach people to lead for the digital age. Most of the focus of leadership development focuses on compliance, planning, and cooperation. It's all valuable, but it doesn't go nearly far enough. We also have to teach leaders how to foster effective, malleable teams. Second, we don't invest in everyone. L&D staff is way outnumbered by employees. Half of UK L&D departments report a lack of resources as their biggest challenge, with 50% spending less than £200 per employee per year on L&D of any type, not just leadership development, and only 12% spending more than £1,000. Put those constraints together, and you get what you see on the right. We're forced to target the most leveraged leaders in their most leveraged moments. It's a rational strategy, but it leaves a huge gap. Third, we don't invest much in the people we do develop. Our forthcoming research demonstrates that we would need to invest 400 to 380 times as much on leadership development as we do today if we want to make our leaders effective. That's a breathtaking increase. It isn't practical, and it's not going to happen. So what are we going to do? That's the focus of our conversation on Thursday. We believe that the only way to close the chasm between leadership needs and leadership capabilities is to adopt open source principles. Now, let me deal with one issue before teeing up open source leadership development. It's this: digitization is no killer app. Digital delivery and reinforcement will be a key part of leadership development moving forward. But as the data on the right shows, the reality rarely lives up to the hype. As one of my friends and thought leaders in our industry said to me recently, as we're implementing it today, leadership development e-learning is just letting us fail cheaper. With that in mind, here's the big question. How do we help all leaders succeed every time they encounter a leadership moment? On Thursday, we're going to tackle that big question together by exploring these three somewhat narrower questions. How do we make a broad spectrum of instruction and tools available to every leader when they need it? How do we provide sustained engagement and reinforcement around desired behavior changes indefinitely? And how do we get managers and more senior leaders the leadership support they need to succeed in the digital age? And I'll give you a clue. We're going to use the word peer a lot. Well, wow, Scott, that's a lot of material to digest, and you don't exactly have a radio voice. So what do I most need to remember? Well, here's your cheat sheet. First, Scott's an American, but a good dude. Everybody else there, not American. 2, the pace of change, uncertainty, and work transformation have contributed to leaders failing at high rates and created value-destroying workplace stress. 3, the tidal wave of youthful employees and the shift in knowledge work creates a major increase in the need for leadership development. 4, knowledge work is profoundly different, integrating the laboratory and production. creating seemingly overwhelming complexity for managers and their teams, and requiring a new way of thinking about work. 5, we don't teach digital age leadership skills. We don't train everybody to lead, and we underinvest in those that we do train to lead. 6, digitization will help, but it isn't a silver bullet. And 7, we will need to adopt open source principles to get every leader the instruction and tools they need to sustain learning, engagement, and reinforcement, and to support leaders continuously so that they can succeed. You should have these cheat sheet points and the message that came with this video, so you don't have to go back and replay. With that, thank you, and all of us at AchieveForum are excited to see you on Thursday.